don't know.
Because April's not sure that she will have service, but she says.
It says it's recording.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Can't see you, but we can hear you.
Wonder why you can't see me.
Probably because your camera's not on.
Start video. Yeah. Start video.
There we go. Now we can see you.
Well, that's good for you.
Oh, you're high tech guy.
Out of here. So I'll just leave this up here plugged in. Now I should unmute, right? I mean, I should.
Hi, Jody.
Your mouth.
Hey.
When you're sitting.
No, not practice.
Really? Yeah. Yes. Maybe I should just set a table here. Yeah, but wait. Almost moving. Will it work? Mhm. There's.
I understand.
You see me now? There. So you can mute now. It's right there. Yeah. Now this thing. Got it. But then they send back.
Well, he teaches Dr. Bed,
Jody, I'm gonna try sharing my screen, make sure it's working. Let's see. There, can you see it? Awesome.
hear me from there, Craig?
Yep, I can.
Doctor.
Jody, could you do me a favor? In the chat box, I added a link to a survey. Could you click on the link and see if it works for you?
Oh, great. Next, gotta go back to my email.
Sorry, Dave, what was that?
I gotta go back to my email then, right?
No, if you look in the chat, if you look at, go down to chat, and you click on the chat, and there should be a link that I sent out. We'll be doing that later on in the day. But Jody, does the link work for you? Okay, awesome.
I see it. I probably won't have anybody show up here.
Larry, throw me down here. Wherever. Yep. Come on, give me that. Would you, yeah, I'd like to have you run that, that'd be great.
I think I might go sit back at the table. And
So you can
look
see.
at the School board.
Yep, and then, so I've added the link into the chat box, which we'll be doing later. We'll be doing a survey thing. I've added that in there, and then I'm gonna have you share a screen when we're going through this, and I've already got it. We're going to share a screen, I've already got it on the other window on Google Chrome.
Okay, so we'll just do share screen and pick that window.
Yeah, it worked good for me.
We got people waiting to get it ready. Awesome, thanks for checking that, Jody.
Not a problem.
Everybody, people are already.
I mean, there are people on it. Morning, guys.
Morning.
Dave Erdwell,
Yes, ma'am.
you got your computer going.
Oh, yeah, but I'm not sure about the link thing though.
Oh, to open an email or what?
Did you go to the chat box down below?
Yeah, I did that.
Mouse-
Then it came up on the side.
And then- Okay, well, if you hit the link that he sent, it should open. Mine came up right in the middle, the screen.
Mine,
I don't see it. So it must happen only when you log in or you have, you know what I mean?
it loaded. Now
Did
it
it?
loaded up.
Okay,
But how do I get back to your live screen again?
well, I had to go back and go back in again because it just wouldn't take me back. So I just went back to the Zoom link and just go in again.
Thank you.
Yep. I don't really want that window there, but.
I'm gonna struggle to see on the screen. But you want to like this, if I need you to move to the next page. Page down there, please. It's actually worked pretty well in the NDSU class in summer when the students are presenting. Instead of having them all split flop on who's sharing the screen, they said page down, page down. They gotta figure it out.
I'm back.
Three, 5.
1174.
Okay.
3041.
For the other people I know that were trying to attend by phone, do the meeting in the vehicle. Put that in the chat box.
Hey, doctor,
Yes,
shouldn't this, because I only have sound coming through my computer and not the TV. Is that the way this is supposed to be?
are you playing to the TV? Oh.
I should probably give Larry a call.
Larry, see what you can do. If you had an Apple and you were airplaying, the way it works for mine is that the sound and video goes through, but since you're doing HDMI cable, for whatever reason, it's only allowing the video through and not your sound. Is it too quiet to hear from the computer if you turn it way up?
Well, I got volume all the way up, but it'd be better if it was coming through the large screen.
Dave,
Right.
can you see where the mute is?
What's that?
Can you see where the mute button is? Can you mute you?
Mhm.
So there's a little arrow by the mute button. And you click on that, and then it says select a speaker.
Mhm.
So I don't know what options you have there, but that's how you would change the speaker.
Yeah, choose HDMI if there's an option for that, Dave.
Leave computer audio.
But then you'd have to dial in a phone. What does it say under select a speaker?
It says. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Holy cow, you're loud now.
That mission accomplished?
Yes, thank you. You speak once. Let me see how loud this is.
Hello, check 1, 2. How's that?
Very loud.
Hey, Dave. Dave,
Better?
just a heads up, don't let my husband get in the background of your Zoom meeting.
You know, that gives me
Just
an
giving you a
idea.
heads up.
I heard he puts on a pretty good show.
So I can't see this. I bet you since when you're on there, it doesn't show your name. I don't know what it looks like. What you guys in the chat, you know what it looks like in the phone.
Dave said that there was a link in the chat box, but I can't see anything.
Marine should be the very first thing from me to everyone.
Okay, was it because I wasn't in the conversation yet? Can
Yeah, I
everybody?
don't have anything either.
Okay. Our tech support is repopulating it. But I suppose we got to wait till everybody's in before that'll happen again, I suppose.
Right. Do you want to maybe send it via email?
I think Larry's got it. He'll just copy and paste it in there. We're not going to use it till the end, near the end of the meeting anyway.
Okay.
But have your email ready to go if we need it back up, okay? Please and thank you.
Is it the same link that I created?
Yes, it's one that you said this is one we should use. It's
Okay.
the very last link in that email.
Okay.
So,
Good morning.
Good morning. With the Robert screen, repeat some of the things.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
We sure can. Can you hear us? Corey, can you hear us?
You can hear me now though, right?
Sure can.
Roger Dodger, going on mute.
Nobody will even do it. Good morning, Team OPS. I can't tell you how much I appreciate seeing you and being able to hear you. I was thinking back, when was the last time that we had an all-staff meeting? It had to be, because the summer we've had several times on FlexMod, and that was primarily obviously the 7 through 12 grades, but I don't think we've met since then, so it's been kind of crazy to think about. The last time that we were all physically in the building was, I believe, March 12th, and that's where we're now. Here we are. So I'm really glad that you're here. It is great to see your faces. My plan for this morning is to make sure that by the time we leave this meeting, you've had all of your questions answered. There's not weighing things on your mind yet. We're going to go slow. We're going to allow you to ask questions in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask questions, that would be fantastic too. But we've got a number of things to cover, and then we'll talk about our next steps and where we're sitting in terms of OPS. So a special welcome to all of our new team members, and we're not going to have you do introductions today because this is an optional meeting. We'll do that in our first regular professional development, but we especially want to welcome you that are new to the district, and we're glad that you are here. So can everybody hear me okay? Are we good with audio? Awesome. So let's do a little bit of a history lesson looking back in terms of Smart Restart Plan. So our initial admin team met on July 9th and had a preliminary meeting and talked about what we thought may be coming out for guidance from the EPI and what we thought would have to be in the plan. A lot of the information was based on what we had for our graduation guidelines and then also for our summer programming guidelines, which we've been following with driver's ed, with open gym, with the library, with weightlifting. And so we had somewhat of an idea of what we thought, but when we met at that time, we didn't know. And at that time, the discussion was that the governor's office said that he was going to come out with guidance for schools on a smart restart. The earliest date would be July 15th. The latest would be July 31st. We can imagine there's a lot of consternation across the state, specifically from superintendent saying, you can't give it to us until the 31st and then expect us to have this all ready to go, within several weeks. Thankfully, they put it out early. I believe the guidance came out on the 14th. And so the second meeting we had as an admin team on our COVID planning was on July 16th, and we spent many hours going through what the guidance was that we got from the state and what we thought our plan would look like and what could best be in terms of comparing to what the state guidelines were. And a draft plan was created and has been a work in progress since that time. Okay. How about now? Can you hear me now? A lot better? A lot worse? Talks lower? Okay. Maybe based on hard work counts. Okay, so the draft plan was created, and what we've done thus far is the draft plan has been given to Dr. Fairness at CHI Health, and so she has gone through it and vetted it. It has gone to Dr. Tara Mertz-Hack at Sanford, who is also the Dickey County Health Officer, and she has gone through, actually made some recommendations, which we'll go through later time here. And she's vetted it out. We're also collaborating regularly with Dickey County Health Department. The Dickey County Health Department is collaborating with Jamie Schmidt, who is a North Dakota Department of Health. And so we're getting guidance and guidelines from them on our plan specifically. And now we're at the step where we provided it to you as staff, and we want to go through and address concerns, get some input from you on next steps and things that we need to address. But I can tell you that when we started this process my first request to our entire team was, I want to keep the underlying concept of what would a reasonably prudent school district do? And so everything that we're talking about, thinking about, that's at the forefront, I guess, of our thought process, is that we don't want to go overboard and do too much. We don't want to do not enough, but we want to do what a reasonably prudent school district would do. We also started off, we got data from you as staff that were survey results of restart planning. We also have data from the families, and we utilized information from that data to drive our plan. And again, we got guidance from healthcare professionals in terms of where we are. So that is a shortened and condensed version to bring us up to speed of where we are. Any questions on the history part of it before we actually get into reviewing the plan? Okay, this time, Larry, will you share the screen and go to the OPS restart 2020? Click on that. One more over it. There we go. Okay, now I can't see anybody. I can only see the 2021 restart plan. So can everybody see that? And if someone could say yes, that would help me.
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you. Okay, page down, Larry. So the first page talks about the coordination, the coordinator and the team. I am the coordinator of the team. The primary contact, though, it says in there is Craig Scott. That has been changed to Carrie. Oh, it's correct on the screen. My printout's a little old. That was changed based on a recommendation from Dickey County Health Department. And they said, there's no way, Craig, you're going to be able to run the school and be able to respond to us on a regular basis, daily and not hourly, on updates and things happening. There needs to be someone else that is going to be the primary contact. And so that's going to be Carrie, and she'll be working directly with Dickey County Health Department on guidance, because as you go through this, you'll find out that they're really going to be the ones that are going to be providing us information on what color we're in, and updates on that's happening, this is what we should do. Sorry, did somebody have a question?
Craig, I don't know if it's your microphone or what's going on, but you're really muffled and it's really echoey and it's kind of hard to understand you. And I'm not that old, so I must not be crazy.
I concur.
Thanks, Dave. But you're old, so it might just be you, Dave. Shots fired.
I'm going home.
Is that any better? I unplugged and replugged the microphone.
I won't really be able to tell till you start talking a lot again.
My assumption is that the microphone is coming from the laptop that is partially open behind me, if it's that muffled, not this one.
Oh.
I don't know, but I could hear you loud and clear, but I can't hear Craig as well.
So it doesn't even seem to be recognized.
bet you can hear me well now.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the microphone it's using.
This was loose.
Dave, I can't see anything but your ceiling. Is that on purpose? Are you hiding?
I think there's only one that it goes in.
But they're all HDMI.
Then it's gotta be that one with the weird prongs.
What's broken? You know, there should be that. You know what I'm saying?
How's that microphone? Hey, there we go. It's changed. How's that? Is that better? Awesome. Yep. I'm getting some nodding.
Yep, that's a lot better.
Okay. Yeah, it was pulling the microphone from the back there. So just shout out again if something changes. Thanks, Larry, for fixing that. Okay, back to, it's page 2 that's listed there with the COVID team. Any questions on the COVID team or contact or how we'll be communicating with Dickey County Health Department? Okay, next page gets into the color system. And so there's 5 different colors, starting with blue is the lowest risk all the way to red as the highest risk. And one of the things that you'll notice is as long as we are in blue, green, or yellow, then it's going to be our local control basically of what our plan would look like. If we are in orange or red, it's automatic that we have to be in distance learning. And it's like thinking back to what we were doing this last spring. And so if at any time we transition to orange or red, we'll automatically be moving to distant learning. We'll be doing meals to go like we had done in the past. And that will be just an automatic. And the thing that we've got to be planning for and cautious of is that it's possible that we may be moving in and out of that color or in and out of these colors as the school year progresses. We don't know. And so as you're planning and prepping, think about how you can make sure that your transition can be as smooth as possible if we get put in the orange. And we've asked questions and said, okay, if we get put in orange, how long does that mean we're in there for? Are we in there for an hour? Are we in there for a day? Are we in there for a week? And they don't really have specific guidelines. They don't necessarily know. We're anticipating it to not be daily. We're anticipating it to be weekly, but again, we don't know. So, and if we were to think about what color we're in right now, we are in green. And so there was information that I added to the calendar that showed how the colors are being identified, because right now it's coming from the governor's office and there is planned to allow it to be happening at the local level from our health departments. But the last information that I've received was that they didn't have the information nor the data nor the capability to make that call yet, but are planning and hoping to be able to make that here in the near future, which would mean that we may have differences throughout the state. I mean, one school may be in orange and one school could be in green or blue. But right now, North Dakota is in green. And so, you know, if we were starting school today, we would be following the guidelines that we have based on green and low risk. So any questions on blue, green, yellow, orange, or red? Larry, were there any other people that were joining, participants or? Okay, let's move on to page 4, and we'll get into the survey results that we utilize to help drive this plan. So on page 4, you'll see that we have the results of parent surveys. There's questions 1, 2, 3, 4. What I'd like to highlight is the 3 biggest precautions that came from the 245 responses. We had 198 saying they wanted additional cleaning and disinfecting. 155 said they wanted daily screenings. And what they meant by that was a way to check symptoms and temperatures. And then 226 wanted extra hand sanitizer stations. So as you'll see as we go through this plan, we incorporated all 3 of these, and we incorporated them into all of the first 3 colors: blue, yellow, or blue, green, and yellow. Obviously in orange and red, we wouldn't need those because everyone would be distant learning. Number 3 talked about if children need counseling service. That number really surprised me that we only had 1 that thought that they needed extra social, emotional, or mental health. Number 4, you'll see that their majority were in favor of reducing student instructional days. And as we go through the plan, you'll notice that I'm going to recommend and ask the school board to allow us to move the start of school date back to August 31st. And that will allow all staff to be able to have extra training and professional development on August 26th, August 27th, and 28th. The next section on page 5 shows the staff survey results. We had 55 responses. And I think it's interesting that there's a correlation that the 3 largest requests for precautions were the same in terms of the 3 biggest: additional cleaning, daily screening, and additional hand sanitizer stations. Moving on to page 6, staff also were in favor of less instructional days to allow for more professional development and more training of staff. So any questions on our survey results from either you as staff or families? Okay, moving into page 7. Now we get into the actual colors. And we broke this down based on how North Dakota DPI had their guidelines. And what we tried to do is try to make it as simple as possible. So I'm not going to read through all these, obviously, but you'll see that we have, like, that first thing for monitoring students and staff. It's all the same for blue, green, and yellow, specifically for monitoring students and staff. The screening we're going to ask to happen is to do home screening, which we're asking you as staff and parents to, and we'll have specific guidance on what questions we want, obviously to ask the kids or ask yourself as a staff member, and then also to do daily temperature checks, and basically saying that don't come to school if you have any of the symptoms. Don't come to school if you have a fever of over 100.4, and that we will not be doing temperature checks while, upon arrival at school. We talked long and hard about the option of doing temp checks, and we said if we have 500 kids and we have 75 staff members and we have to do them individually with thermometers, we would have hours of temperature checking to be done. And there are some other options out there. One of the salesmen came around and were selling, it was multi-people scanner. So it would be in front of your front doors when they came in. What's that?
It's like an iPad on a stand.
Yeah, kind of like an iPad on a stand. And as people would come in, they would put a little box around the person and put the temperature of what that person was, and the box would be red if they were over 100.4. Then you could pull those people off to the side and tell them they need to go home, what have you. And I asked him, I said, well, what do these cost? Because it would go a lot faster than scanning everybody individually, but they were $21,000 and there was no guarantee on when we could get them. And so, in our case of having multiple spots for people coming in the building, it just really wasn't feasible to be able to do. Of course, if we're in orange or red, we are distant learning, and so monitoring students and staff is not going to be necessary because you would be at home. Then we go down to what happens during school hours if a student or a staff has a fever of 100.4 or higher or exhibiting 2 or more symptoms of COVID. We'll automatically require them to put on a face covering, and they'll be escorted to the medical room. The medical room is the office that's right beside mine. And Dave and Reed have assured me that they have pumped in air that comes from that medical room directly into my office to make sure that I'm, filtering exactly what's coming from that room. So thanks, Dave and Reed, for taking care of that for me. And so there's a protocol, whether it's a student or whether it's staff, but basically the student will leave the room, the staff will leave the room when available, and we'll get them out of there. We know it's going to be challenging is trying to get a substitute in if we've got a staff member that goes out during the school day that has COVID-like symptoms, and who's going to want to come in and do that? We know that's going to be challenging. So following that, then going a little bit further down on this is the absences, and we've gotten guidance from Dickey County Health on that. The magic cutoff point is still that 100.4. But we also talked about what happens if you have someone in your family that has symptoms. Can you or can't you come to work? And so that guidance is also listed in here. And the members of the COVID team, if you've got input as I'm going through this, please stop and let me know. Okay, moving on to page 8. Absenteeism and attendance. So we know that we're going to have to be making modifications on attendance, specifically with students that we can't be denying credit if students are out sick and truly have COVID-19. We've got to be able to make adjustments to that. We know we're going to be probably making adjustments that if a student has symptoms and they follow through these guidelines and the guidelines say that you should stay home, that we may not be able to mandate that every time this happens they go to the doctor in order to be able to get credit, which is what our previous plan had been. There's just going to need to be some leniency on that. Same thing for staff attendance policies. There's going to need to be some changes in there. One of the big discussions we had is if you get contacted by the health department and they say you were a close contact of someone that had COVID-19, you're automatically mandated to quarantine. How many days is it? Is it 14? 14 days. 10. Okay, excuse me, 10. And so then the question is, well, if you're not able to be at work, and you're not sick necessarily, but you have to be because you were called as a close contact, how does that work for leave? Well, we can't count that as sick leave because you're technically not sick. Basically, you're going to be asked to do your work from home if possible. If you can't do your work from home, then we have to get a substitute in, but it's just going to be paid days because you have no control of that. You can't do anything about that. The big thing in sessions and the trainings that I've been part of is that, one of the thresholds is that simply being afraid of contacting COVID or being afraid of contacting and spreading COVID cannot be the sole reason that you would not go to work. I mean, you can't say, I'm afraid of this, and so I'm not coming to work. That's kind of the threshold that we've seen. Now, if there's medical diagnosis because of COVID-19 that you have anxiety, depression, all those things that are causing it, we have medical professionals that can provide that, then that's a different story. And there are different programs and plans that have come out from the federal government that relate to like the Family Medical Leave Act based on leave with COVID. So a lot of things are different or have changed because of that. Also, we have to have in the plan that staff or students that have underlying medical conditions and are considered high risk by a physician will be provided distant learning options. Obviously, we're following student IEPs, 504 health plans, et cetera. They'll be reviewed and updated to decrease the risk of exposure. Any notification that we need will come through our communication system, social media, telephone, app, et cetera. The big thing that I want to let you know is that in order to make sure that we're not putting on information that we shouldn't, or we're not breaking HIPAA violations, or not breaking FERPA violations, we as a school system are not going to be putting out information on who becomes sick or who becomes infected. The contact will directly come from the health department. So you'll get information from them if you are a close contact. That's not something that we're going to be putting out on social media and saying, oh, so-and-so got this, or that. So please be aware of that. So any questions on this section, which is labeled health and safety, or comments or concerns?
Craig, I have a question about the leave, I guess, or the absences.
Sure.
So at our daycare, from the state level, like if, let's say, a student in my class or in the junior high test positive, my kids automatically can't go to daycare because like I was in the vicinity, and then my kids were considered also, because they live with me, obviously. So
Yep.
Then my kids can't go to daycare even if none of us have symptoms. So would that be a situation that I could teach from home?
That's a good question. My short answer would be if you're providing no other option and that's what it's got to be, I think we'd have to consider allowing that. The challenge is what happens if that's all year long, as we have symptoms come and go.
I agree. And I thought that same thing when she told me that, but that's coming from the state level for daycares. So that would be every teacher that has a kid in daycare, that would have this same, issue. I mean, like my husband can't stay home for 10 days, obviously, with his job. So it would just be, I don't know how to handle that. So I wanted to ask.
Right. And it's challenging because let's say that happens in all daycares and all of our staff. And then, obviously, depending on the age of the kids, it may be more feasible or less feasible to do distance learning. But if we have multiple people doing that and that we can't find people to come in and at least monitor or be with the kids based on their age range, that puts us as a district in a new predicament of not being able to staff the way we can staff in order to do the work we're doing. So, one thing, hopefully, as we go through this plan, as you see, hopefully that would correlate with color change too, what you're talking about. If that happened, if, cases were growing, and hopefully the changes in our color code planning would allow for hybrid options or distant options so that it would correlate along with that happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Good question. Other questions on this section?
Kayla, can you repeat what you said about the guideline that your daycare provider gave you?
Yeah, so basically, like if I'm in the vicinity or if somebody tests positive, like in my classroom, and which would be a number of kids in the junior high and would eliminate a ton of teachers, honestly. Like if we have somebody that tests positive, like my kids automatically can't go to daycare for that 10-day period unless we voluntarily have COVID testing, which would be an option for some people, but I'm not going to COVID test my kids every time one of my students tests positive. That's not, I don't know. It doesn't feel good. Hayes had to have it done for surgery and it's not great. So.
Kayla, did they say, so if, let's say your daycare, how will they know who's a close contact? Because like what I told you, we're not going to be telling people, and we don't necessarily know it's going to come from the health department. So how are they going to know who's a close contact and who's not, since it's coming from the health department?
I'm assuming that she's relying on parents to be very upfront about that. You know, and
Okay.
I think at our daycare, at least we've been very good about being open and like, there's a chance somebody could have been exposed. So then everybody else kind of knows not who it is, but they're aware of it, you know, and I think that every parent should be like that, very upfront with what's occurring. Like there's a chance that I could have been exposed. So, you know, I mean, we wouldn't want to put anybody else at risk that goes to our daycare, you know. I don't know. I guess they're relying on the honor system. I don't know.
Sure. Okay, moving over then to positive or close contact. And this section really talks about if someone has actually tested positive for it, or if the Dickey County Health Department or the health department contacts you and said, you have been in close contact with someone that has tested positive. And so if we're in blue, green, or yellow, if we're in blue, we're not going to have protocols necessarily for that. If we're in green or yellow, we'll obviously follow the guidelines listed by the Department of Health. But during school hours, if a student exhibits a symptom, multiple symptoms, or has a fever, then we talked about, I mentioned before, they would be asked to put on a mask and they would be put in the room beside me, and then parents would be notified to come get them. If we have a staff and member, they would have to go home. And there's been lots of discussion on, okay, you have, let's say, for example, you have a fever of 100.5. You're sent home. Does that mean that you have to be sent home and then you're home for 10 days? And the answer is no. You're home, but you have to be fever-free for 24 hours and without any medication. So you can't say that I've got 100.5, I took Tylenol, the fever's gone. It's got to be for 24 hours, but it's not that full 10-day. And we had a lot of discussion on that and a lot of guidance on that specifically from the health department. And of course, if we're in orange and red, schools will be closed. We're doing distance learning anyway. Okay, the next section is communication and training. As I noted before, we're planning to have training on the 26th, 27th, 28th, pending school board approval. We'll use, with the new change last year to hours instead of days, we'll have plenty of hours in our calendar that we won't have to add these as new instructional days or additional instructional days, so we won't make that up. It'll simply be that we're going to use the extra days we have in our calendar to do these days. Training topics will include the items listed there because we're gonna have to be training. I mean, I think it's understandable and it's appropriate that at some point in time, all of us will be helping with cleaning and disinfecting. And so you need to be properly trained on how are the cleaning supplies that we have and how disinfecting works with the supplies that we have, how long they need to stay in contact with the surface to kill bacteria and viruses and whatnot. And also, I think this training this additional time is also going to be imperative to help you prep and plan to make sure that you're nimble to be able to make adjustments if we have to transition to social distancing basically on the fly. Yeah, we'll use our regular communication devices that we've done before, whether that's the Blackboard, the email, the text message to notify parents of changes. Obviously use social media, use email, those kinds of things. So any question on communication and training? Any areas there that you'd like to have added to that list?
Craig, what is the other professional development days in addition to 26th, 27th, and 28th? Are we still going with the 20th, the 24th, and the 25th?
Yes. And we'll have, we have typical professional development. I need to put out the entire PD plan for the year. But our other professional development is going to be around our personalized learning and our action planning for that. I've also got to look at the mental health training based on state guidelines and based on our strategic plan initiatives. So the regular PD will go on as planned. August 19th, I believe, is the date for new employees. We've got to figure out what we're going to do though with back to school nights and those things, if we're going to be adjusting that.
Okay, are we still having school registration on the 17th?
We've not changed that as of now. No.
Okay.
And, you know, I think, was it last year, Carrie, that we switched registration? The parents had options of coming in or doing it online, or was there another option? Or they could do it at home and then mail it in or scan it and send it in. So we at least have those options, because a couple of years ago, we made everybody come in and sign the paperwork, and now we've got options for them not to be able to have to come in.
Okay. I was just wondering if I am coming in that day.
17th?
Yeah, because Mr. Beta had said something about we're gonna do something for registration, but I didn't know if that had changed.
Okay. Yeah, I
We'll
don't know
talk
if we've
about
got any
that
more
later,
changes.
probably.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, move on to page 11, hygiene, cleaning, physical distancing. So we talked about hand sanitizer. We'll have stations have hand sanitizer available in each room and in hallways. We're going to encourage students and staff to use hand sanitizer upon entering and exiting every room of the building. That's obviously it for blue, green, and yellow. And we talked about not having that as part of our blue zone, but because of the survey results from you as staff and from families, we decided that we should have it in all of our colors of blue, green, or yellow. Obviously, orange and red, distant learning. We're going to be having changes to food service. There will be a plexiglass barrier up in food service so that we don't have kids as they're coming in that could sneeze on the food or cough on the food. Things are going to be changing. Salad bar is going to be gone, which is, you know, unfortunate. However, that also provides us, because of not having a salad bar line, we're going to have more space, so we'll be able to space tables out better in the lunchroom area. All food's going to be plated by the staff. The kitchen staff will be increasing serving sizes to accommodate for the loss of the salad bar. The kitchen staff will wear face coverings, you know, while they're serving the food or while they're prepping the food too. Water fountains, the drinking water fountains, they'll be plugged so that the regular part of the water fountain won't be utilized, but the bottle fillers can all be functioning and still functioning. So we're asking kids to have water bottles and fill their water bottles and not be sharing the water fountain. Once the Southeast Region Career and Tech Center gets their plan, we'll incorporate that in. For busing, we're encouraging riders to sanitize hands upon entering and exiting the bus. And later on, we'll talk about recommendation from Dr. Mertz-Hack that we're going to take into consideration. I think we have to follow it. I mean, I've said that from the beginning, that if we get guidance specific to our plan and recommendations from our health professionals, I guess it's beyond me on why I would not take that guidance and advice. You know, I'm a superintendent. I'm not a health professional, and so I need to rely on the information from them. So there'll be an adjustment with the busing and also probably bathrooms, hallway, and common areas. We're going to install foot poles in some of the bathrooms so that that's an option, just, you know, to touch the doors, and possibly additional paper towels is available for opening and shutting doors. We won't be sharing any kind of equipment, supplies, those kind of things. And so, like, specifically in the elementary, you know, they've shared supplies. That won't be happening for this year. We'll also be adding additional signage around the facility to encourage, you know, the best hygiene practices, and that will be coming signage from the state Department of Health or CDC guidelines or both. Okay, moving down to facial coverings. We don't have them required in any of this plan, although when we go through the guidelines, they are recommending that we add facial coverings for kiddos on the bus and bus drivers, as well as the kiddos in between passing time when they're not within their own class. And so we'll talk about that, but that will be an area that we'll be adjusting or adapting. Moving on to cleaning. The cleaning and disinfecting is all geared around different groups and changing of groups. So instead of, specifically saying that it's going to be 3 times a day or 4 times a day, it's going to be based on the changes of groups. And that's going to be similar in the classroom, in the lunchroom, PE and music. We'll have to have equipment and disinfected between each of those groups. The playground, we want to let everybody know that we are not going to be sanitizing the playground. We were doing that this summer. We are not continuing that. And busing will be clean and disinfecting in between groups. And the biggest challenge for us there is the continual bus that goes back and forth to the SRCTC. That's probably going to be the most extra clean and disinfecting done there. We'll add in the SRCTC plan. Central office, bathrooms, hallways, etc. They will get routine cleaning and disinfecting in high touch areas. So tables, doorknobs, areas that, countertops that are typically getting touched a lot by people. Physical distancing on page 13. Classrooms, we're going to mandate every classroom. This is for blue, green, or yellow. You have to have assigned seating in classes, and they're recommending that we have the kids all face the same direction. If they can't face the same direction, then they're recommending the kids are in pods of no more than 5, correct?
Yes.
Those of you that are a part of our team. So like it says, when individual seating is not available, pods are acceptable depending on size. They're not wanting the pods to be more than 5, and so those 5 kiddos are together kind of throughout is the hope and the plan for that. This says that the playground will be closed before school opening. Students will be assigned locations to wait before class. We got updated guidance on that. Maybe it's on here. From Dickey County Health Department, and they said, where are your kids going to be if they're not on the playground? And we explained to them, they're going to be in the building, they're going to be in different places. And they said, if we're going to really compare odds, and we're probably better off to have them on the playground where they're outside. They're going to be more separated and more apart than they would have been if they're inside. So that guidance is going to be changing on here, that the playground will be open, and that came directly from update from Dickey County Health Department. And that will also then change. Recess can be scheduled per class due to that change. I don't know that recess will be scheduled per class. Anna, anything on that? Any update you have?
No, we're gonna still do as we had planned, but we've got less kids out on the playground anyways. That's the way we had planned it. So
okay,
everything is still gonna be the same as of now.
Okay. Moving on for the lunchroom. Why is this? I can't remember. Why is it blue and green only and not yellow? Should that be over for the lunchroom?
What does it say in the middle there?
Oh, serving may be altered. Okay, that's why. Mine doesn't have that on there. Serving may be altered if we're in yellow, but we're still going to serve breakfast. We're going to try to stagger it so that we're not having as many kids in the lunchroom at the same time. We're going to spread tables as far apart as we can, and it's feasible. And like I said, we'll have more space in there than before because we won't have the salad bar in there. Plexiglass will be installed. Markers will be placed on the floor to encourage distancing while waiting for your plate and waiting to be put take your plate back. Students that are required to be isolated or quarantined will receive to-go meals. And again, the yellow, where we may have additional restrictions there, and if we're in orange and red, we'll be providing meals, and they'll be available for students to pick up. And we also know that, let's say we have a family or staff member that are quarantined because of having COVID or being a close contact, we're going to provide delivery for them, not just make them come and pick that up. The next section down there is on physical education and music, and we're going to do our best to have seating as far apart. We had a lot of discussion on this, a lot of discussion on whether or not we, should allow multiple age groups to be together, like for example, in choir or band, or even SRCTC classes, or SRCTC where they've got multiple schools coming together at one point in time. But I can tell you that a big a big indicator for us that really modified and molded this guidance specifically was North Dakota High School Activities Association and allowing activities to participate, because I really struggle personally to say that, well, we can't have choir get together with 4 different grade levels, but we can allow sports to get together with 4 different grade levels. And plus we're going to travel to a different school and do that. And so we have to have some continuity amongst activities, amongst electives. We can't say we're going to do it in one spot and not do it in the other. And so that a lot of our discussion, when we talked about elective courses and activities, they were all kind of lumped into a similar category. There's information there about busing, which we'll be updating, and we'll talk about that. Central office, we've already got the plexiglass in the window. We'll have to place markers on the floor to encourage people to social distance. We're not going to allow lunch guests, so we won't be allowing families to come in and go to lunch like before. And non-essential visitors will not be allowed in the building. So we really shouldn't have outside people in the building basically at all. And that's a request from Dickey County Health Department. So even our vendors, unless it's essential that they need to come in and meet with somebody, our salesmen, we're going to ask them not to come in if they can do work and be distant. We prefer that.
So no college reps or anything like that?
Nope. Good question. Yep. We're not going to allow them in.
How about the military?
No. Would
Okay.
they? Yeah. No.
Okay.
There wouldn't be any. I guess I don't know. They'd be able to still meet with students, but we're going to ask them to do it virtually.
Okay.
We'd want to be accommodating with them on how we could do that.
All right, Craig, could I interrupt there? We do have a sub that is military, Aaron Schmidt. And he is interested in subbing. So are we going to limit him access since we don't allow others?
He'll be in a different role in that time frame. He won't be a military rep. He will be a sub.
Okay. So if he were
other subs that might be subbing someplace else outside our district.
Okay.
I don't know. But that's what my brain thinks.
Okay.
Greg, I have a question. With early childhood, we have little ones coming in when they're only 2.5 to test. Are there going to be exceptions for that?
Are they going to be what?
Are there going to be exceptions? Because these little ones that get referred at like 2 years, 7 months, or they start when they're 3 years old, are we still going to be not allowing those parents to come in?
No, I think those parents, we'd have to allow them to come in and go to that. I mean, we can't expect a 2-year-old to walk by themselves down there. So I think that would be an exception, yes.
I mean, just even for testing, they wouldn't come with me if they didn't know me, so.
Yep, agreed. Good questions. Great questions.
Greg, I had a question.
Yep.
This kind of goes back, I think it's a couple of slides. I just remembered it. So with the no sharing supplies part in the blue, green, yellow, like what does that look like in a class if like you're using a lot of shared supplies? Is that like eliminated all completely, or do you have to like hand sanitize like all the stuff that's touched in the room?
Like, can you give me an example of what kind of supply or equipment you're talking about?
Well, like with science, I mean, there's microscopes, there's models that are used, and like, are those like just off the table for the year, or do they have to be cleaned after every time they're used, or even like textbooks or?
Yeah. No, I don't think they'd be off the table. But here's the thing, like, let's say, for example, for microscopes, which you probably already did this before, but if, let's say that you got 3 or 4 kids that are using it, so they're a familiar group, allow them to use that and share that, but don't have the rest of the class rotate through and use that same microphone. So you're minimizing as much as you can. And as you're using it, you should be disinfecting specifically in between groups. But I wouldn't say that all that equipment and supplies is totally off.
Okay.
What we were referring to more of were like things of like, let's say that you got a marker bin, and instead of kids using their own markers, everyone's got to dig into the bin and use that. That's an example of that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, moving on to drop-off pickup areas. We're going to ask that we don't have everybody come in the same spot, so we're not congregating, so to speak, or not having everybody come through the same area. The K through 3 students, we want them to enter into door 7, that's the flagpole door, and exit out either door number 5 or 7. Both of those are the flagpole doors on the north and the south side. Obviously, if a kid is not riding the bus, they would go out 7. If they're riding the bus, they're probably going to go out 5, go through the playground to get on the bus. We're asking that parents are not entering the building. We don't want them in the building, congregating inside, and I know that's going to be challenging. That's going to be not fun to enforce. 4 through 6 students, we're asking them to use door number 2. That's the south door of the 4 through 6 wing, and also exit out that door. So if they're 4 through 6 graders, we prefer them to use that south door. Again, we do not want parents entering the building. Doors will not be unlocked at the end of the day to prevent people from coming back in. We'll obviously have to have alternate pickup and drop-off arrangements if there's parents that really have an issue or a struggle due to multiple kids and multiple sections of these drop-offs. And we're asking that be pre-approved by the principals if they're going to have an alternate thing other than using those doors. Talks about bathrooms, hallways, and commons areas. We're going to have capacity limits stated out in front of the bathrooms, so we don't, obviously, we're not going to have someone patrolling that and counting, but we're going to ask them to monitor and do that so that we don't have more in there than the capacity is supposed to allow. Additional safety measures that we're going to be changing. No over-the-counter medications will be allowed to be administered to students unless physician order requires. And we've done that because in talking with healthcare professionals, they said, if you're really giving medications that they could be masking COVID-19 symptoms. If kids got a sore throat, kids got a headache, whatnot. However, we do know that we have certain kids that are prone to specific issues, and would they have medical reasons for that, they'll be allowed. But basically, our medications, over-the-counter medications, are going to be suspended during this COVID time. The lunch, we won't have all the kids typing in their number. Obviously, that'd be everybody touching the same keypad. Lunch cards will be issued to each student and staff, and it will be used for meal purchases, so that card should be able to be scanned. There should be a no point of contact for that scanning. The wellness center that we've had some outside people using, that's only going to be allowed for you as instructors to use or activities. No visitors or public use of that, so an additional safety measure. So any other questions on the section of hygiene, cleaning, physical distancing?
I have a question on physical distancing. The student lounge right by my office, what is the plan with that space? Because that's definitely not physical distancing.
Yes, I talked with Mr. Beta about that. Carrie or Anna or anybody else, do you remember he had a plan with that, but I don't remember what it is.
I thought he said he was just not going to use it, but I could be wrong.
No, it'll be open, but with a capacity limit. I thought it was
Open with a capacity limit?
I think that's what we talked about, because there are kids that don't have any place else to go but there.
Mm-hmm. And we had a long discussion about, that's an example of it, that, okay, so if we don't allow kids in there at all, and they go somewhere else, are they going to walk across the street and be socially distant in the apartment across the street, and yet come back to class with us the very next 20 minutes or whatever. But that doesn't mean that's just going to be open and free for all. So that's bringing back a recollection. I think it's going to be listed as a capacity and then asked to have social distancing happening in there, to the extent feasible.
I have another question. One thing, thinking about just the distancing in the classroom and whatnot, and I think most students will be fine with this, but just thinking of like the loopholes of like students trying to find ways to get out of stuff. Do we have like any like expectations, consequences or whatnot for like students who like refuse to do like any guidelines because maybe they don't want to, or like they're playing the card of like, I don't believe this is a thing?
Mm-hmm. Great question. Mr. Beta has not added any of those health and safety things into the matrix. I can tell you that.
I had a quick one for in my room. Might be a little bit of a silly question, but with the spacing and sitting in the classroom with the same direction, or you said pods no more than 5.
Yep.
A lot of my classroom seating is just kidney bean tables. So would that just fall under, could I still use those and just consider that a pod no more than 5 and just have 2 of them sitting there? Because they're going to be facing each other no matter how I seat them on that.
Yes, that would be, you'd maintain your pod of no less than, or no more than 5.
Okay.
Is the weight room / wellness center, once school starts, are we still gonna have to limit to 15, or are we gonna figure out the capacity of that and then go with that?
Yeah, we could figure out the capacity and go with that, but North Dakota, we have to follow the 15 until this plan gets approved by the school board. But after that number 15 is nowhere in any of the guidance or guidelines. North Dakota High School Activities Association says that we can't be more than 75% capacity in our facilities for activities. So I would say that we'll probably be following the no more than 75% capacity in the weight room. But that's not going to be happening. You'll still be doing the disinfecting between groups, but that 15 is not going to be utilized after this plan gets approved. Great question. They're all great questions.
I'm thinking about dismissal at the end of the day, and even without all the parents there, the hallways are majorly congested. Are we going to be staggering dismissal so that not so many kids are in the hall?
We have not planned to stagger dismissal more than what it is now in terms of the high school and elementary. However, when we go through the recommendations that we need to update, the recommendation is that we mandate masks to be worn in passing time, so the kids would be wearing masks while they're coming and going.
Is that even when we're in blue and green?
Yes.
Yes. Kelly, we had a lot of discussion about staggering times, and we said, how can we do that feasibly, specifically with busing, and then how do we do that if it's altered time or wait time? And so that was a discussion that we said we're not sure how we can make that feasibly work to stagger it outside of getting kids not to go out the same doors. That hopefully that will minimize congestion, rather than them all going out. We have a lot of kids that typically go out the door number 2 on the 4 through 6 wing because that's where the buses are. But we're asking that the K through 3 wing not do that. So that's a great point.
So I watched Anna when you mentioned wearing the masks in the hallway. That's been the biggest question I've gotten out in the public and at baseball games, and they're asking about masks. So really they would need to wear masks at the end of the day because they'd be passing kids in the hallway, correct? That's what you're saying?
Yes, and that's the recommendations that we're getting from our Dickey County health official.
Okay.
Yep.
Does that mean even with going into music or FIED, so every time they're in the hallway, they need to wear their masks?
I believe.
Well, FIED and music, I think we could stagger them because they don't all go at the same time. Like we could have them make sure that they're a little bit, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
How about going to lunch and that?
I got to retract something. I misspoke. Anna asked, is this in blue, green, and yellow? The guidance says for page 11 for facial coverings, in concordance with evidence-based guidance from the CDC, Departments of Health, and several other organizations, I would urge changing the blue and green phases to strongly encouraged, and in the yellow phase, highly encouraged, the consideration requirement of facial coverings. So there is a difference for that. And then where is it on the Did I make that up about the busing and I don't see it on here now.
I remember reading that on Terrace too about the buses.
Where's it at?
I also do too.
Where?
I can help you out because I was there when she was writing it. It was, yes, as you said, with the classroom, the CDC had recommended mandating on the buses.
Okay, where's that at on here?
I don't have it with me right now. I'm not
Okay,
sure.
page 12. Again, in concordance with evidence-based guidance from the CDC, I would urge consideration of the requirement of facial coverings during transition times between classes while in the hall and while riding the bus, at minimum in the yellow phase. So, I mean, for me, there's no question that in yellow we need to add requirement of wearing facial coverings on buses and in between in the yellow, at minimum.
That means that if we're wearing face masks, they're going to have them on from the minute that they come in that building until they get into the classroom. So parents will, in the yellow part there, and that was the thing our parents did not want.
Our parents may not have a choice.
Right.
I guess I just have
It's yellow, but blue and green, we're going to lose that whole, if we're in yellow, I get that. We're up, but not blue and green.
Yeah, I misspoke. It's because it states specifically the minimum of yellow. So that was my wrong interpretation.
So that means in blue and green, we're not going to mandate it in the hallways.
But we'd
in yellow, we will.
strongly encourage it.
Okay. I mean, I just think for Tucker could pull it off. I think he would be okay. Addison would be like, your mask is cooler than mine. Let's trade. I don't think that that's feasible for her as a first grader.
What about on the buses if
Totally get
we
that.
are able to social distance? Will they have to wear a mask?
It doesn't say anything on here about a difference of social distancing or not. It says if it's in yellow to wear them.
So I see Brennan shaking his head. So Brennan, if we go back to our original plan of making less kids on the bus that they could social distance, we wouldn't have to wear masks on there?
I'd have to check with Tara. I think the intent was if they're not able to be social distance, they would be required then, yeah.
The thing that comes to my mind on social distancing on a bus is that if we're going to do social distancing on busing, it has to be for all busing. So whether that's back and forth to school, whether that's the football team going to Oak Grove, which would mean that if we're gonna really limit, we'd have to have multiple buses instead of one. And I can tell you that with the bus driver shortage that we already have, it's not even realistic for us to be able to, it's not feasible. It'd be feasible for us to say, because we were originally planning to cut in-town busing to limit the amount of kids on the bus. But I really struggle if we're going to cut in-town busing, but then we're going to allow the kids to ride together on the center bus, or we're going to allow the kids to ride on an activity bus and not have it be reduced in number. We have to do it for all or none. So, unless you've had a lot of new bus drivers that have signed on from last night until this morning that I'm unaware of, that we'd be able to, have more busing available to keep the numbers lower in there.
No, I haven't. I'm still short a couple.
Still struggling.
So if we're in blue and yellow, do we need to wear masks on all buses? That's my question.
So if we're in blue and green, we'll strongly encourage masks, will not require it. If we are in yellow, we will require masks.
I'm sorry, what happens with activities then when we're in yellow? So they have to wear masks every time we pass in the hall for activities, but they're all together on those buses for football and volleyball and playing sports and
We'd have to mandate, they're in the bus, they have to wear face masks on the bus.
or in the locker rooms or
Well, it doesn't say locker rooms on here. It says passing time or busing.
But I feel like maybe that should be modified to add locker rooms if you have one class walking to the library. So one third grade section, and they have to wear a mask, and they're the only people in the hallway besides, maybe admin. Like that to me is pretty well socially distancing versus having an entire Phi Ed girls class in the locker room at one time, or an entire basketball team in the locker room at one time.
We'll seek specific guidance. Will you note that? And we'll ask specifically on locker rooms and face coverings.
Is there any I feel a cleanliness issue with our kids if they're wearing masks. I don't mind wearing masks, but then when they take them off, where are they going to go?
We'll have to ask that question too.
Okay.
I would agree with that. But anyways, so then if we send the football team out of town and we're in blue and green, would they wear masks?
No, not in blue and green.
Okay.
We would strongly encourage them to, but not require them to.
And when we say strongly encourage, that's like us saying, okay, time to go to your next class. Consider wearing a mask. And then like what they do after that is their.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And realistically, would they need a different mask between each class then? Because it's counted as, like, it's supposed to be a one-use type of thing. I mean, I'm thinking even like elementary kids, if they go to recess or whatever, if they go to the lunchroom, they have to wear their mask. They have to go to choir or music class after that. They need a different mask because it's only a one-time use thing, and then it needs to be sanitized or else a new one.
I'll have to ask specifically on guidance of that. My thought process from listening and going through the guidance is that no, it wouldn't require a new one for every time.
Okay.
But we'll ask that. I'll get Carrie making notes.
Thanks, Carrie.
I guess I'm concerned with the littles. I mean, if they are going from class to class and they have them, I mean, thinking these first, second grade kindergartners, they'll probably have it in the morning, and by 9:30 they're going to lose it. So are we going to have extras in the classrooms for kids? Or if a parent sends it with them, does that mean we have to keep pushing them to wear it all day, even if they don't want to? I'm just thinking about the little kids.
Sure. Blue and green, I would say no. Yellow, when we mandate that it has to be in passing time and on the buses, yes. Now, granted, we're providing a distant learning option. So, I mean, as of right now, we've got 30 some students that are planning to not attend face-to-face at all here. So we are providing an option for families that are unwilling to or unwanting to follow guidelines that we're getting recommended to us by healthcare professionals. 30 some students. Ooh, that didn't sound good. Okay, last page is extracurricular activities. We need to incorporate links. I don't think they're in there yet. Maybe they are. The links that the guidance came out just, I don't know, yesterday, 2 days ago. They have specific guidance that's overall, and then they have guidance that's specific to each individual sport. Brennan, do you have anything you wanted to add there from what you saw, or anything that you regarding North Dakota High School Activities Association guidelines?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that capacity, as you kind of already mentioned, is all based on what level we're in. So I believe blue is no restrictions and green is 75% capacity, and I think yellow was 50% capacity. So all of that is based on the capacities of the different buildings that we're in at the time. So we just need to kind of figure out what our capacities are for the different areas and things like that, and then that determines who and what level of people can be there then.
Thank you. And we're going to have, this is going to be an ongoing challenge. This is an ongoing discussion when I'm in admin meetings, because they'll bring up the question. They'll say, okay, so if the colors end up being where the local, either towns or counties can do their color, and we're a school and we're in green, but we're playing a school that's in yellow, what are we doing? Is it a forfeit? Is it not? Can we go there? Should we not go there? And so I'm just going to tell you that we're going to be constantly monitoring and doing the best we can with that, because there's going to be lots of questions of what we can't do, shouldn't do, should do. And it's kind of like we were in a Dickey County health meeting last week. We spent an hour and a half of the meeting. We got done, and they looked at me and says, Craig, just remember, everything that we covered today may be outdated tomorrow. Wait a minute. It may be outdated tonight. And so you've got to realize that all of this is fluid, and all of this will change. And I'll tell you, it's frustrating as HE double hockey sticks to me, and I'm sure it is for you. And I'm sure it is for our families as it just continues to mold and modify and adapt. And I go back to, let's root ourselves in what would a reasonably prudent school district do? Okay, the last section before I go through the recommendations, again, I've kind of touched on them, but I want to read them so that we know what those are, and we'll go to the pages. This last section on this 15 is academic instruction. As of right now, blue, green, yellow are traditional learning with restrictions. Orange and red is full distance. But as you'll read, and I'm going to get your input, we're going to vote on it here. The recommendation is to consider adding a hybrid option while we're in yellow, which would be not having as many kids in the building at the same time, such as like an A-B or a rotating type schedule. So before I go through the recommendations from our Dickey County Health District and the Dickey County Health Officer, any questions on academic instruction, traditional versus distant learning?
Yes. Can I just ask, so you say you have 30 some students who are not coming back. What are we doing with them? If they're in our class, are we Zooming all day? What are we doing while we're teaching the other kids in our class?
Right. We're going to ask that question. I'm going to ask that question of you, and we're going to vote on it here. So I've got an idea of what you're feeling and thinking, because there's categories. So for example, if we've got the 30 some kids and they're basically spread out K through 12, and they're saying we are not coming to school at all face-to-face at OPS, we're mandating that it has to be a semester at a time minimum, so they can't say, oh, October, you know what, I don't like this. This stinks. I want to come back. You can come back, but you're not coming back until the next semester. So we've got to figure out how we're going to educate those kids. And our options basically are we going to get a third-party vendor that would educate those kids, and so that's not your problem as teachers? Or do we want to figure out a way to teach them and they're still our kids, but they're not going to be here? But I'm going to ask you that question. We're going to get a poll on that. So that's a great question. That's a category of kids that aren't going to be here at all. But we also may have kids that want to be face-to-face, but then get sick or are in close contact with somebody, and they're going to need to be gone for a time. We're going to have to be able to teach them remotely while they're still at home waiting to come back to school, if that makes sense. And that's a different category of a kid, actually even a different category of staff compared to we don't want to be in school, learning at all. And so those are different categories, so to speak. And I can tell you I've got different ideas and different thoughts and different plans, but I'm going to get your feedback on that when we get into the voting process here, which we're not there yet. So great question. Any other questions before we go through the recommendations from Dickey County Health District?
I just want to point out that if you do go to the yellow and you do say do half and half, keep in mind that some of these kids get OT, PT, you know, sometimes those people are not in the building. So if you go to every other day, it will affect those that are receiving special education services.
And we'd have to we probably should specifically identify how we would do that with special ed. I don't know if you saw in the news, Fargo Public Schools really got, I don't know, chastised for not specifically mentioning special ed in their restart plan, which we don't have it specifically mentioned in ours either. So great point. Okay, so let's go, Larry, can you go back to page 9 under health and safety, high risk individuals? So here's guidance for this. It says, go up a little bit. Right there. I think, is that page 9? Okay. And this is guidance from Dickey County Health District and our Dickey County Health Officer, who is Dr. Tara Mertek. It currently states that only students and staff with underlying medical conditions and defined as high risk by a physician will be provided distant learning options. I would urge that students who have household members or other regular contacts with high risk conditions be provided the option for distance learning as well. And it says, I would urge that students, now, yes, I would urge that students who have household members, right. Now, that's for high risk. We're also offering a distant learning option. So I think we'd be okay, but we may want to add verbiage in there about that. So that's page 9. Also on page 9, regarding positive or close contact return to school, the wording as it currently reads is reasonable, but to make you aware, the Dickey County Health Department and I are working to figure out the best workflow for return to school statements for those who have not been tested for or have a negative test for COVID. So we'll get additional verbiage and we'll incorporate that here on page 9 from Dickey County Health Department, specifically for people that are out and have symptoms but then get tested negative or don't get a test done, which we had a lot of discussion on that. If people refuse to go get testing done, then when they can come back, when they can't. Yep. Okay, page 11 is the next one. And this one's on hygiene, cleaning, physical distancing, facial coverings. In concordance with evidence-based guidance from the CDC, Departments of Health, and several other organizations, I would urge changing the blue and green phases to strongly encouraged and then the yellow phase highly encouraged, a consideration of the requirement of facial coverings. So that's page 11. We'll do that. Blue and green, we'll say facial coverings are strongly encouraged. In yellow, highly encouraged. Makes sense. Sounds like something a reasonably prudent school district would do. Page 12, physical distancing. Again, in accordance with evidence-based guidance from the CDC, Departments of Health, and several other organizations, I would urge consideration of the requirement of facial coverings during transition time, an example between classes and while in the hall, and while riding the bus at a minimum in the yellow phase. So we will add in the yellow phase that facial coverings will be required during transition times and for buses. I think Anna said it well, you know, if blue and green, if we still keep it with highly encouraged or strongly encouraged, that makes sense. But with the yellow and the guidance here, I think that's reasonably prudent. Page 15, academic instruction. Okay, academic instruction, while in the yellow phase, would consider the impact of continuing exclusively with traditional instruction instead of reduced or staggered in-person instruction time or a hybrid model of instruction in order to prevent nearly an automatic transition into the orange or red phase due to a high number of students and staff being out with COVID or in quarantine as contacts of a positive case. And so and I'm going to ask you that question. Should we add a hybrid model into yellow? If we're in yellow, should we be doing something hybrid? And I think if we did something hybrid, it would possibly be different in the elementary versus the high school. Because the high school with flex mod scheduling, I don't think that, in talking to Brandon, he doesn't think he'd be able to do anything other than like an A-B week where kids A through M would come one week and be live, and the other kids that were L through Z or N through Z would be at home, but could be live or watching recorded lessons. And then you'd flip flop in the weeks. Anna had a different idea or thought about 2 of the days that would be a certain group, take a day off that wouldn't have anybody in the building, and then have 2 others. Anyway, we're going to ask you your input on that, on having a hybrid day in yellow. I can tell you that the bigger schools, the plans that I've seen pretty much all have them have a hybrid model if they're in the yellow, and then obviously distance learning for orange and red. Okay, questions on what I just read you for changes that we're going to be incorporating into our plan?
I have a question. I guess it goes back to the colors a little bit. Yep. And I read your thing about who decides what color we're in. Are there any actual hard numbers as to what constitutes what green is and what yellow is? Or, I mean, I don't know, maybe Brendan, you know better. But
yeah, Carrie's asked that question too. So
what I can tell you is the answer is no. There is no number, and the number changes all the time. We were on a call with Dickey County Health last week, and a nursing home facility was going through their last round of testing to move to a different level, and we're told that they couldn't move because there were too many active cases in Dickey County, and there was 1. The reality is, what we hear is we are never, ever going to be in blue until there is something that there is either a vaccine or something to that effect. We will never be in blue because we will never not have somebody with a positive case in recovery or in the testing phase. And it changes every day. The health department recommendations changed from Monday to Friday last week. So every day it's something different, and there is no number, and nobody at the health department at the state level can give you a number that says, yep, on this day it's this.
Larry, can you take us off shared screen so we can see everybody again and they can see us? Please and thank you. Awesome. Great question.
Is there anything, Carrie, that, I mean, what in a nutshell, what turns you from green into yellow?
The number of cases. The number of cases pending. And in my conversation with Dickey County Health last week, when we were discussing how that'll work, there is a chance that we can be green in the morning and we can be closed at noon due to an outbreak.
We've got lots of questions in the chat that we should answer, and I've also got some good questions that were emailed to me that I wanted to go through before we have you vote. So I'll start with these questions here and answer them, and then we can answer chat questions. Sound good? Larry, would you be able to read them when we get to that point? Yeah. Okay. So here's the first question. What will schools do if a child's infected? How about a teacher? We've covered that in the plan, so I think we're good. We're good on that. 2, if a teacher is forced into a 14-day quarantine because a child or colleague contracts the virus, will the teacher have to use his or her sick days? And the answer is realistically, no. Because you can't be mandated to be away from it and have to use sick leave. 3, will the Center for Disease Control guidelines for wearing masks and social distancing be applied in every school in each district? We talked about that. So that got covered today, and we got guidance from the health department on what we're doing with masking. Number 4 is what key data points will be monitored to inform decisions, and Greg just answered that question, and Carrie just answered it to the best of our knowledge. 5, what if only 60% of parents feel that our schools are safe and 40% do not and choose to have both the distant learning for their children? Will teachers be expected to do both online and face-to-face? We're going to vote on that here coming up. Will extra prep time be provided for the extra duties this entails? We'll vote on that depending on the outcome. I mean, if you as a staff agree that it should not be your responsibility to have those kids and we should secure third-party vendors to teach them so it's not our responsibility, then it would be on an outside entity. It wouldn't be it wouldn't be your issue, and you wouldn't need extra prep time because you wouldn't have those kids anymore. Number 6, will students and staff have reliable and effective personal protection equipment? Yes, we're going to provide personal protection equipment. If we've already had some teachers ask for specific things, we'll do everything in our power to get those for you. So I know some people ask about face shields, and we have those. Obviously masks. Some have asked about gloves. We'll do everything we can to provide those for you.
At this point, I have secured a package of masks, a box of gloves, a gallon of hand sanitizer for every classroom and bus. If there's
Earlier,
go ahead.
We had talked about if someone gets a fever during the day, then they would put on a mask and go to the medical room. Will we have thermometers in our room? Or how will we know if we have a fever?
How do you know now if you have a sick kid in your classroom? I don't know the answer to that. That's like, do you?
But I mean, if it's someone like, I'm not feeling good, then I would just say, okay, go to Carrie and Maureen.
Yep, that's what I would say.
Okay.
We have thermometers for all of the elementary classrooms because it's harder for those kids to transition. If we feel we need thermometers for high school classrooms and teachers are comfortable doing that, we can certainly order thermometers for every high school classroom. But somebody needs to let me know that sooner rather than later so I can get that stuff ordered so we can get it here.
You're gonna have guidance like on gloves from Tara and those guys, because like I know that people have gloves, but if they touch one kid's things and they touch another kid's things, that you just transfer that, because like you can only use your gloves for one thing and then you got to change them.
We have asked Amber to come in and do training on using of gloves, using of masks, removal of gloves, removing of masks, that kind of thing in one of our PD days.
Perfect, that'll be good.
Presley, back to your question though, like if you have a kid that you can tell doesn't look good, is not feeling well, and you said the typical thing is to send them to the office, but we won't be sending them to the office to sit in with everybody else. They will automatically be going to our medical room, and then we'll have protocol for what people have to wear to go in the medical room to check on that kiddo, and to determine their symptoms, and based on their symptoms whether they're going to stay in class or go home. So that, I guess that's a big change, is that we won't be sending sick kids to the office to be sitting in the front and be around other kids. And we'll train you on that though too. I mean, that's all going to be part of the professional development of the extra days we have lined up. And then, there's more questions in here regarding specifics in the classroom on this question 6 about, close contact with kids. And I think this is an example of having to incorporate special ed guidelines in addition to our plan, kind of like we have SRCTC. Does that make sense, Lindsay? Yeah. because I mean, you get unique situations there. Number 7, what will be the trigger that sends all students home and reinstates distant learning? And it'll be the trigger that we get a call that says, Oaks, you are in orange. And we'll be making the announcement and we will go distant learning. I really hope we don't have to. Really hope that's not there, but we got to be prepared to do that. Okay, moving on to questions from chat.
The first question is, does Mr. Schneider have nice guns?
Does Mr. Schneider have nice guns? Apparently, yes. Next question.
So are parents of a classroom notified that a student was sent home with symptoms?
No, you will only be notified from health department officials if you end up being a close contact or if you're kids. So let's say, for example, that a student would go home, get tested positive for COVID. That parent of a kid, if their child was in close contact with that child that tested positive, they will be receiving a contact from the health department, not from the school. Great question.
Will we be getting touchless soap dispensers?
We asked about that specifically, and the answer is no, because when you touch that soap dispenser, you're putting the soap in your hand, you're washing your hands, you've eliminated the germs, so there is no reason to spend the extra money on a touchless dispenser.
Oh, are you able to hear the questions when Larry asked them or not? Yeah, sort of. Okay, I'll repeat them from here on out.
Are student staff allowed to bring food into the classroom?
Are students and that it wasn't a pirate accent?
No, I like it.
All right. Sorry. So, sometimes we have to just laugh, even though we're going through crap. I mean, anyway, the question is, are students and staff allowed to bring in food and or drink into the classrooms? We didn't have anything in our guidance or anything that states that we have parameters on that. Obviously, we wouldn't want to be sharing food and drink with everybody else, but there's, yeah, if you allow it now, you'd allow it in the future. I don't think that we'd have a specific guidelines on that.
Scan cards, you covered that already.
Yep, scan cards, we covered that.
This says, how about public library?
How about public library? The public library will be following the guidelines probably of the capacity limit of 75%. As of right now, they're still using the 15, but go ahead.
So will they be using the public school entry to sign in and check out? Or since no outside visitors are allowed in the school, or will they be going, like, I'm just brainstorming in my head, like they'll be going straight to the library then and not into the office because no outside visitors are allowed?
We haven't discussed it.
That's a good question. We've not discussed that. Thank you for bringing that up. We're going to have to get planning on that. When do the public library hours start?
1:30.
1:30?
Maybe it's going to have to be 3:30 after our kids are gone.
Yeah, because right now, if they come at 1:30, they've got to check in the front office and then they go there. So, yeah, great point, Lindsay.
Okay, this was probably about sharing lists of graphing calculators. So, in upper math classes, I imagine.
Yeah, I think, Liz, you asked about sharing graphic calculator. Did my explanation of using the microscopes make sense? Okay, she gave it a thumbs up.
Okay, are we expected to do any physical distancing in our classrooms? I'm not sure how this would work with larger classes like 8A or 8B.
Yeah, the physical distancing is that we're going to do everything we can to the extent feasibly possible, and also try to have the kids face in the same direction. So in your classrooms, we want you to have your desks spread out as far as feasibly prudent or feasibly able to do. That makes sense. Like one area, the band and choir room has specific flooring that's meant for where the band usually sits, so that when they empty spit valves and whatnot, it's on the tile, not on the carpeting, well, that's gonna have to be expanded out and spread out. Like, and I heard yesterday, Williston, they're putting, like baby doggy diaper pads down, or doggy diaper pads down on the floor for spit valves in bands. So that's where they're gonna be spitting on, so that they're collecting the spit and it's not, going in other places. But that's an example where that the band and the choir are gonna be spread out far more than they were, and they wouldn't be following the normal flooring guidelines. Okay, Larry?
Could the school provide cheap lanyards if we go to Orange?
Could the school provide cheap lanyards if we go to Orange? Could be more specific, for what?
You can unmute, you don't need to type. For kids to keep their masks.
Orange will be closed.
Orange, they'd be at home. So you're saying you have a lanyard at home, or you mean for yellow? Yellow. That's a possibility. Mm-hmm.
In the weight room, the girls got really good at just wrapping them around their water bottle. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but they wrapped them around their water bottle and would walk around with them so that they wouldn't touch the floor, but they'd still have them on their germs. So I don't know.
Other questions?
Are there any regulations or guidelines on students or staff travel?
North Dakota currently does not have any guidelines or regulations on students or staff traveling. Remember when this first came out? If you had left the state and went to certain hotspots in the country, then you had to isolate for so long. Those have all been lifted, and they were actually lifted probably end of April, early May, somewhere in there. So there are not any. There are guidelines, like New York added North Dakota as a state. They can't travel. If you're a New Yorker, you can't travel to North Dakota and then come back without having to isolate for 14 days, but not for us going out.
Will we be getting new cleaning supplies, wipes, sanitizer weekly? I imagine we'll be burning through it pretty quick.
Yes, great question. So the question is, will we be provided with cleaning supplies, sanitary wipes, whatever? Yes, you will. We will provide those, and we'll provide you training on how to use those. And we know that we'll be having to provide lots of it because you'll be going through it quite a bit. Great question.
Hey Craig, my biggest concern is home health screening. I don't see all parents checking temps. Number one, because they do not have time. Number two, because many steps to preventing COVID has become political. I think it is a step we can control. It may take extra time, but having high-risk parents that my kids spend a lot of time with, bringing to their house may be deadly.
I totally understand that. We talked a lot about that we're going to have parents that are not going to tell the truth. We're going to have parents that aren't going to check. We're going to have parents that have symptoms and are going to mask it with ibuprofen and Tylenol. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's a real challenge. And I think that we're going to rely on you as teachers, because you're going to know with your kids if they're not feeling well. You know your kids. I mean, you can tell when they don't look good or they don't feel good. We're going to rely a lot on you to help with that, to make sure we don't have kids being there. Governor Burgum says it well. We've got to stop doing the North Dakota tough and come to work and come to school. We've got to be North Dakota smart and stay home if you don't feel well. So I totally get that concern, and I too have it.
No, I think Nolan was just making a comment.
Yep.
Very sure I'm not the only one that could live with myself. If I do the contact tracing, we would possibly know who it is. Good Lord, sorry about the spell.
So yeah, and I get, the big thing is we're all in this together, and we're all trying to do the best we can to prevent the spread, and yet also educate our kids at the same time. So great questions, great thoughts. Now I need to get your input. because we need to figure out, I gotta have a plan walking away from this meeting on what we're gonna do with students that do not want to attend, at least for a semester at a time, the school. So Larry, could you go to, and make sure, yeah, copy and paste that link into the chat box again?
Keyboard doesn't work. Oh, there it is. Oh, hit return.
We hit return on the laptop. Maureen's on there. She was gonna be our backup too, if we gotta have a different way to get the link.
Voting right now, or are we going to talk about those different options?
We should talk about it before we vote.
That word.
Yeah, I agree.
You said, okay.
Okay.
Anna, would you expect the high school and the elementary to do the same thing?
Okay,
Or, like,
so if we have to go to staggered.
Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of have talked about that we're in a heightened state, you know, and we're in yellow. And probably we're going to have to do its best for both of our schools, and whatever our staff decides. You know, I don't know, for the elementary, going week by week. So if you get to see your kids for a week and then you don't get to see them for another week, versus having that more frequent contact in the elementary. So like Roxy could see her third graders, at least she'd get to see them 2 days a week, you know, versus a whole week without seeing them. That's a long time for those little kids to be away from us. But with your high school schedule, like Brandon said, you can't really do 2 days on, and, you know, with your, that you guys would almost have to go and week by week A/B schedule.
So
what about even for these?
Couldn't we just change our schedule in order to align it with yours if it came to that point, instead of doing flex mod at that point? If we're gonna go hybrid, we could just switch it for the hybrid purpose.
Wish Brandon was on here, because he would be the one that could have, you guys will, I think you guys are gonna have to decide as a staff. And I think
Yeah,
He
okay.
just walked in.
So the question, Kaylin, the question you have is, instead of going in A/B to accommodate FlexMod, you were wondering, could you abandon FlexMod in the yellow zone and go to what kind of a schedule?
Just do something similar with elementary, so we don't see the same kids for a whole week and then not see certain kids for that whole week. So if we did what, like Anna was talking, 2 days on, a day off, and then 2 days back on with different kids.
Yeah, like we were thinking, like if we did, like group A would be in class, group B would be doing online. Then Wednesdays would be days that the kids would still do online learning, but that would give the teachers a prep time, right? You would be at work, you would be doing that, but that would give you time to plan, because your planning is going to be huge, because you're going to have to be planning for in school and out of school and how you're going to do all of that stuff. And then that would be a cleaning day. And then group B would come to school on Thursday, Friday, and group A would be at home. Or, I mean, we could do some kind of a combination of that. That's just one I saw from a school in South Dakota, what they were doing. My kids plan.
This is someone else, see if there's any kids coming from schedules. I'll just stand.
Yeah, you want to answer that question from?
You want to repeat it?
Mrs. Hafke?
Was it abandoning the FlexMod schedule?
Just if we had to do something hybrid instead of having all the same kids there for a week.
There's
Is
a
there
water phone in the
schedule out classes?
Can you grab it?
I personally would rather see us have the kids for a full week, because you're gonna have parents with both sides of the building. So to me, it make more sense to have a whole week of group A, and then the next week would be B, because your numbers gonna be cut in half, and you still have that chance to have a limited number of kids in the building. If we're gonna abandon the schedule altogether and you're gonna flip flop that as soon as we go yellow to all of a sudden go back to green, like I don't know how that looks. I don't know how you're gonna build a schedule that fits every kid's request now, because right now kids' class requests are based on our current schedule. And if all of a sudden we tried to make that into a 7-period schedule, I don't know how that looks. So to me, for planning, if I've got a kid in elementary and high school, I want them to be on the same page, whatever that looks like. I threw the idea out there, maybe you go Monday through Thursday, or Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and you have one of those days for cleaning regardless, or planning time. But I don't know how you create 2 separate schedules in our current system. I don't know how that looks. Maybe somebody has an idea of how you could do that.
if you switch to another schedule, you'd have to go through the whole process we did with FlexMod and
The whole thing, 'cause-
recreate one that would work so the kids are getting the classes at the time they're supposed to be getting them, right? I mean, so it'd be doable, but it'd be going through that whole process again like we did with FlexMod to prepare like a 7-period bell schedule, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it would be feasible in this short of a time frame.
Did any of those families, of the people that said they weren't gonna come back, give any guidance as far as what their expectations were from the
There
school?
was
No.
not a place to put that kind of information.
Yeah,
It was for them to request information about distance learning.
But nobody's reached out and said, I'm telling my kids and I expect this.
No, the question was, were there any expectations provided by the parents of those that said they're gonna have their kids not attend, at least for a semester, face-to-face? There weren't any expectations or guidelines that were given, because the parents have only seen the summary of this plan, not the entire one. And we've done that on purpose because it's not approved yet, so, but, good question.
Craig, what if, I understand, 30 some parents did not want to send their kids and you're committed to a semester. Like right now, like we made the decision, yes, we're comfortable sending our kids, but if we start to get into the yellow or we start having multiple cases at school, what happens with the kids that we pull? What if we would decide to pull our kids, especially our higher risk kiddo, then who's responsible for teaching? Then do we have to try to get into this third party, or are we going to come up with a plan like the hybrid plan? Because I really could see that happening.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And that's specifically with the distance versus our regular students, it's a really challenging thing, because on the one hand, we don't want to be forcing you as teachers to say you have to teach face-to-face plus you have to teach the kids distant at the same time, because I get that that's way above and beyond what we normally do. On the other hand, if we say that we're going to go third party only and our numbers really go big to that other direction, and we don't have the numbers necessary for the staffing we have for face-to-face, then we've got the other problem of now we've got more staff than we technically need, because so many are distant, and it's kind of a 6 of one, half dozen of another. I can tell you what other schools are doing, like Valley City, who's asked us about joining a consortium, which I've not approved yet or not said we're going to jump into, is that what they're looking at doing is providing some of their staff, because of the number of kids that transition out and are distant only, they don't believe they'll need as many teachers, as many sections of classes, because their sections are now smaller, and they're going to have some of those teachers be the distant teachers. Based on our numbers though, our numbers are so spread out, K through 12, the 30, 33, 34, or 35, whatever it is. We don't have any one area, like it's not like it's all fourth graders that said we're not coming to school, that we wouldn't have a need for 2 sections of fourth grade, so that's a difficult thing, and that may mold and adapt and modify as we move on. I mean, we like you said, we may start with that, and then as the year goes on and we transition, we may end up having way more families that want to be distant learning the second semester.
Isn't that the kind of reason though that Tara said in yellow we really should have a hybrid model? Because that's when families are going to say, so the families in blue and green that choose a different option of learning, they would stay in distant learning even if we're in yellow. They wouldn't hop back into our school. They would just be distant learning for that semester, homeschooling, or whatever that they choose to do. But for yellow, like what Kelly's talking about, when she would maybe go, it's not safe for her family, we would be providing it, but that's why we need the hybrid. I think that's what Tara was saying, right? Because there's no way that our teachers can do these 2 different pieces. So we're going to have to do a hybrid to separate out smaller groups, but also allow for some flexibility on how we offer what we offer to those kids, right? Because then Kelly wouldn't be going to that third party vendor. She would be staying with the kids if we're in yellow and she's going, I'm not sending the kids. Correct?
Correct.
Yes, that's kind of my question, and actually a comment of something to be thinking about going ahead, that these numbers aren't necessarily set in stone. In a month or 2, we could have 30 more families decide to pull their kids because COVID's getting too close to home.
Mm-hmm.
Totally agree. Okay, anything else that you think we should talk about before we look at the survey? And we can, before we take the survey and take the questions, you could specifically ask me, what does this mean, or what are we talking about? So that I've got, you're aware of what you're answering. Anything else, Anna, you have before we get into that?
That was just maybe the teachers, if they understand about buying from that vendor and the amount of time that they would spend in there, just so that they can make that decision. Maybe just if you don't understand what would be the options in blue and green,
So as of right now, as it sits, as of right here, if we choose to say that the kids that don't want to come to our school, we're going to provide them an education and it won't be our staff doing it. The plan right now sits is that 6 through 12 would get their classes from the Center for Distance Education. Like we have kids that are taking additional classes now. And the North Dakota Center for Distance Education has all the classes that we would offer 6 through 12. They don't have them K through 5. So the K through 5, if we did as it sits right now, would have to have another third party, not the Center for Distance Ed. Anna's got an option that she has sent me. And then also we've been invited to join with Valley City and Hope Page and Northern Cass. And that program is a third party too. It's through Arizona State University, which would be online. Now we could possibly do it entire K through 12, but as it sits right now, the plan would be that 6 through 12 would be using Center for Distance Ed, and we've got to figure out what that vendor would be for K through 5. And that's if we choose to not educate those kids, here. Does that, Anna, did that help? Or did I make it worse?
Okay, so another question I've been thinking about too, that the teachers, let's say that those kids, they choose that option, those families choose that option over homeschooling. So what if they don't do the coursework? Does that mean that they stay in the grade that they're at? Because I could see a family going, well, I'm just not going to homeschool. I'm going to do this. And they get the product from us and they don't do what they need to do because we're out of the equation, right?
Right.
The families are the ones that are responsible for doing that program. But what if they don't do what they're going to do or don't do what they're supposed to do for that semester?
So this isn't like what we had last March where it's no new content and we just want to have some, they're going to have to pass the classes in order to be able to get credit. That's one of the things that our distant learning plan, which it doesn't say there specifically, but last year in the elementary, we really didn't have any new content per se. That's not the case this year. We have to move on with content and go along. So if the kids choose to do a different option and they do nothing or they bomb it all, they're going to figure out a way to make that up in order to be able to move on.
I think we're going to have to maybe make that clear to the parents when they're making their decision that if you don't do what you need to do.
Right.
Now homeschool is a whole different ballgame.
Yep. And homeschool is an option. We have people that may do that. And we're required to allow them to pick and choose what classes and what activities they want to be part of for homeschool. So the same thing is true. We may have a family that says, I'm not comfortable with my child coming to school face-to-face, so we're going to do your distant learning option. However, my child will be in football. And our option is we got to let them. We've had that's been a statewide debate for several weeks. And they're taking precedence from what homeschool law currently says that they're allowed in. We would have to allow the same thing with our distant learning students, even though you could argue that doesn't make logical sense. But
Denise just said that, if those people do want online education, she's assuming we still have to provide special education services.
correct. Yeah, we'll have to provide special education services regardless.
That's going to be a whole different ballgame. We're going to have to be meeting with Tracy because we do have some special ed kids that have already told us they're not coming back. So we'll have to work with Tracy, but we still have to provide services or we have to figure that out. So that we'll deal with that later once they decide to. Tracy will help us with that.
Okay, would you want to click on the link so that it pops up on the screen and we'll share that so they can see what it is and I'll walk them through these questions and then we'll see the answers we'll be able to show the answers basically instantly, I believe. Okay, are we sharing our screen?
No.
Okay, give us a minute. We'll share the screen.
Go down, just click on Zoom.
There it is. Okay, so the link to this survey is in the chat box. So the first question, should Oaks Public Schools seek a third party to educate the student choosing to only participate in online learning? And I'm asking you that question, that if that's what we should do, that's the direction we're gonna have to go. I need your help and guidance on that. Any questions on that question? That makes sense? Number 2, should OPS provide alternative instruction days while in yellow? And we've talked about that. We got the recommendation to consider that from the Dickey County Health Department to, if we're in yellow, that we're providing some sort of an alternating thing. And we've, what's that?
It's not really an option.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to do it.
Are students who doing online learning only allowed to participate in extracurriculars?
Yes, students that choose online or distant learning only will be allowed to participate in extracurriculars. Yes.
K2, record all lessons.
What's that?
Attend via distance and interact from home. Can we train our staff on Teams since Zoom is no longer free? Zoom is no longer free.
Liz, you're unmuted, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The teams, we have teams.
You want to go next, Larry, and we'll show yep. So here's this scenario idea. NDSU is doing a high flex model, they're called. And basically what that means is that you as a teacher are teaching your class normally face-to-face, and the kids have the option to come to you face-to-face. If they choose not to want to be face-to-face, they're using technology to allow that student to be participating from home live at the same time. So it's synchronous. And so my question is, I know that it's almost impossible that we wouldn't be able to do it with K1, 2, maybe even 3. How are you gonna control behavior and whatnot if you got kids at home? But my question, and I've asked Larry, I said, with the technology we have with one-to-one and with using either Zoom, it's not free now, or Teams, or we pay for Zoom or whatever, is that something we could feasibly do, specifically if we're in yellow, as an option? I'd even go so far and say, is that something we could do instead, and have our kids be distant at home and they're still going along and being taught along with us, even if we recorded it, or if it was live, or if it was both? I don't know. Is that feasible? Just a scenario I'm throwing out. So that's where those other questions come from for 3 and 4. We'll give you a little bit more time, and then we'll go to the results of this and show you the results. And then I've got a direction to go from this meeting, which will be to, figure out educating kids that are going to do distant only and yellow zone. Do you want to stop sharing the screen? And we got to go to the email from Maureen. And that's where we'll be able to see the results, and we'll be able to share that result. So you go back to Chrome and go to my inbox. And Maureen, right there. Okay, here's the collaboration. So click on that first link there. Yep.
There's a question about, is mine's impossible?
Is buying Zoom possible since we know how to use it? Yes, I think buying Zoom is possible. I don't know how much it costs, so if we're gonna have to have $100 a license. So if we bought it for every,
Teams hasn't really changed a lot, and I think we could do an in-service on Teams.
okay.
It's not all that different.
Mhm.
I've had meetings this summer with it where someone else ran it, but
Yep.
from my viewpoint, it was pretty much the same.
Okay. So let's go to, back to share screen and let's share this.
Results are still coming.
Okay, so as of right now, we have 35 responses. Can you see those on the screen for questions 1, 2, and 3? Overwhelming. Number 1, we should seek a third party. Yes. Bada bing, bada boom. So I will work with the principals and we will do that. Number 2, should OPS provide alternate instruction days while in yellow? Overwhelmingly, yes. So we will begin getting planning going for that. I'm gonna have to meet with Anna and Brandon on how that looks and how that would work for days, depending on schedule and whatnot. And number 3, can we train our staff and students on Teams? Overwhelmingly said yes, 34-6. Okay, could we incorporate this in our yellow zone? Yes, no, other. And that was to do where we would provide instruction and provide a way for kids to be at home and yet we're instructing at the same time. What was number? Is there more than that? There's a 5 and 6, or is it just 1, 2, 3, 4? That's it. Okay, awesome. I have a direction to go as a district. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. You want to stop sharing? And the next thing I have is the next step. So I want to tell you what we're going to do here next in a time frame and where we're going, and then we'll get you off this call and on to the rest of your day. Okay, so looking forward. First of all, we need to update the plan based on what we talked about today, which I'll work with Carrie and April and Maureen on, and we'll be updating that plan, okay? Our COVID-19 team is meeting again on Friday, this Friday the 31st. We'll have an updated plan. We will probably cover any questions, concerns that we have at that point. My hope and desire is at the end of that meeting, I'll be able to ask Maureen to send this plan out in draft form to the public so they can see it and allow them to provide feedback on it. And then ample time. I'm struggling with how long we give them, how we don't give them, whether we do Facebook Live or whether we do a Zoom meeting to allow for questions. We may have to do those things so that it provides them an opportunity to do, to ask questions like you, because basically you just went through 2 hours and you got caught up in 2 hours of what we've been discussing for months, basically here, that we got to allow families to get caught up and, go warp speed and get to that point. But I'd really like to get the school board to review this and approve it during the week of August 3rd through the 7th. Because when we wait that much longer to get it approved and then put it out, it just puts us that much further behind the 8 ball. So that's where we're at and looking forward. I do not foresee major changes coming from the plan. However, it's possible. The school board has the ultimate say in it. And what I'll tell you this is that, let's say the school board wants to not follow something here or something in the plan. I'm going to tell them, like I've told them other things, is that I'm unwilling to say that we shouldn't follow guidance from the Dickey County Health Department, from CDC, whatever. But if you as a school board are telling me, Craig, do not follow the guidance and we're going to vote on it, you're going to follow this instead, I'm going to have to be obliged to follow that. So that's the discussion we'd have if there's big changes from the school board. I'm not anticipating there will be. but there could be. And I think the other thing is to remember that we're constantly changing, and information is constantly being updated, constantly being modified. So in closing, I'd like to thank you for your time. I'd like to thank you for your input. I really appreciate the questions. I truly appreciate you being here and volunteering your time to be here today. And it's great to see the OPS team together and collaborating and doing the best we can with the information we have to move us forward and to get us closer to a restart plan. So any final questions, final comments, final considerations before we sign you off? There's this question there.
I asked if it would be possible to divide the kids in K6/712 for the third event.
Yeah, Kathy said, would it be possible to divide the students in case 6, 7, 12 for the third party? That is possible. The CDE just goes down to 6th grade, so that's where we started that as it being feasible. But yes, if let's say, for example, Anna says, I prefer to keep my K through 6 all together with a third party, we could split that so it's K6 and 7 through 12. And that would actually follow along with the way our schools are broken down now according to DPI of K through 6 and 7 through 12. So great question. Anybody else? Any jokes, Carrie?
My head doesn't hurt yet today.
That's
I got
good.
Nothing.
Okay, thanks everybody. If you have questions, you have concerns, you got issues, contact me. And again, we'll do our best to get this rolling. We'll do our best to get the school board to get this approved August 3rd through the 7th. And then the information will be coming fast and furious on getting you planned, getting you prepped, giving you additional professional development time, and us rolling. So be well, be safe, enjoy today and enjoy the rest of the summer as best you can. The fall is calling. So take care. Thank you.